Can you just imagine how much easier the game of football would be if you were as athletic as Erling Haaland? I mean, he has a top speed of over 36 kilometers per hour, or just over 22.5 miles per hour. And despite his size and how long his legs are, he actually has elite acceleration to get open in the box with a quick burst of speed. Speaking of his size, he is one of, if not the strongest player in the Prem, coming in at 6'5", 195 pounds. And don't even get me started on his acrobatic ability to create these crazy vertical jumps, scoring goals just like this. But here's the thing, speed, strength, power, vertical jump, all these things, they can be trained. And I have helped athletes get results in all of these categories. And I'm gonna teach you how to do just that in this video. But real quick, make sure to let me know in the comments if you want me to do this style video with another footballer. Whichever footballer gets the most comments is the one I will do next. So let's stop wasting time and let's get into it. If you still don't believe that speed is important, you should listen to what Pep Guardiola has to say. After a match where Haaland scored multiple goals, Pep Guardiola said this about Haaland: with the space in behind, it's unstoppable. There is no central defender, not even with a gun. It's impossible. So fast and so powerful. See, even Pep Guardiola, the master tactician, can acknowledge how important speed and strength is to Haaland's game and how this allows him to dominate the greatest league in the world. And I have helped my athletes get results just like this, taking 40-yard dashes from 5.2 all the way down to 4.5. And what I'm about to teach you is one of the most important things that I did to make this happen for my athlete. So many people talk about the importance of glutes, and that's for a reason. They are the most powerful hip extensors in the entire body, specifically when the hip is at 0 degrees of flexion. But many people, and maybe you included, do not use them to the fullest potential. Because you could have the strongest glutes in the world, but if you don't put them in the right joint position to actually fire, then they're not gonna be helping you as much as they could be. So here's exactly how to fix it with 3 exercises. So we want to do 3 exercises that actually teach the body to delay this knee extension, and stick with me here. In real simple terms, delaying knee extension is when the knee is directly below the hip, the knee should still be bent to some degree. By making sure that the knee is bent to some degree when it's directly beneath the hip, we are making sure that we're actually driving that hip extension with the glute instead of the quad. Then at the very end of that stride, you can fully strain it out and you can use all the muscles in your lower leg to actually drive you forward. And I know what you're thinking here. Okay, that sounds great in theory, but what are the exercises that we need to do to actually train this? Now, the first exercise is a sensory exercise, and do not skip this one. If you skip this one, then the next 2 are just going to be not useless, but definitely not as helpful as they could be. So what I would start someone with is a split stance RDL, where we are actually holding on to something with the hands. Because this is a sensory exercise and this is step 1 out of every single exercise that we're going to do, I want to create as much stability as possible so that we can teach the hip how to actually move. Now, the key thing that you want to focus on here is keeping a slight bend in that front knee the entire time, and then shifting as much weight forward onto the front part of that toe as you can the entire time. The back foot is just barely touching the ground. It should be just about weightless. Then again, do not forget, you need to maintain that amount of knee bend the entire time. We do not want the quads to be working, and to work the quads, we would be straining out and bending that knee. So that thing needs to stay exactly still. Record yourself from the side the first time you do this exercise, and I can guarantee you're gonna see that knee moving forwards and backwards, even when it doesn't feel like it. Then, keeping your spine as long as you possibly can. Think about touching the top part of your head and the base of your tailbone and creating as much distance there as you possibly can while you reach those hips back behind you and get a crazy stretch in the hamstrings. Then, and only then, return back to the top position as far as you can without straining out that knee. A lot of times when people do this exercise, they do not come back into this fully vertical position, and that's okay. I would rather you finish into a position that's more at this angle and maintain that amount of knee bend at the same time versus coming up all the way to the top and then losing the knee. When you do this right, you will absolutely light up your glutes. Your legs will be shaking and you'll be feeling something that you have never felt before. Cool, but we can't superimpose sensory work onto ourselves to actually make us athletic. We need things that are a bit more stressful to actually translate onto the pitch. And that's where exercise number 2 comes in. So then this is a split stance wall reference kettlebell RDL, and you're going to do the exact same thing that you did with the sensory exercise, but now we're going to be adding some weight and you aren't going to be able to use the hands for extra stability. Start light with this and work your way up, but don't feel like you ever need to max this exercise out. This is still more of a warm-up exercise or a tertiary strength exercise. Then after doing those 2, you want to take what you have learned from those 2 and apply them to plyometrics and sprinting. So here's what we'll do. You're going to start with a single leg horizontal force production plyometric, just like this one. With these, start with sub-max variations, meaning do them at 50% intensity first. force. By doing it at that intensity, you're going to be able to focus on those actual cues that we talked about before, with delaying that knee extension and actually moving with the hip. Then when you get up to 75%, that's where we need to just trust the fact that our instincts are going to kick in and that we have trained our body to move properly. You can't be thinking about these cues while going and producing as much force as possible. So once we hit 75% and above, you just need to do the movement at the proper intensity. And that is exactly how we can take those movements and have them actually translate to natural movements on the pitch. One of the most underrated parts of Haaland's strength is how it impacts how defenders play against him. And none other than Big Meek's Micah Richards has this to say about Haaland's strength. Once you get in a physical battle with him, it's impossible. You would rather give him space. Now just imagine being so strong that defenders would rather deal with your 22.5 mile per hour top speed versus your strength. That's what defenders are dealing with when they go up against this man who's just an absolute wall of a person. And strength is so undervalued by footballers, but it doesn't just help with shooting the ball. Strength helps you with anything that requires high amounts of force production. So this is top speed, this is shooting a ball, this is jumping as high as you can, the list goes on. And maybe most importantly, it helps you actually reduce the risk of injury so that you can get even more minutes on the pitch. So allow me to teach you how to do it right, like I taught my athlete here. Now this seems obvious, but to get as strong as possible, you need to pick the right exercises. We all know that. Stick with me here because I have a specific way of doing this that I rarely see athletes use, let alone coaches. Now every exercise can be classified as either primary, secondary, or tertiary. And I mentioned tertiary in the first part of this video. I'm sure a lot of you were wondering what it meant. Your primary lift is going to be your main lift or lifts of the day. These will be the heaviest and most simple exercises. Your tertiary lifts are going to be the last lift or lifts of the day, and these will be your lightest, most complicated, and can even be sensory exercises. And your secondary lifts fall somewhere in between these two. So a primary is a back squat, a secondary would be a split squat, and a tertiary would be a front foot elevated cross connect sandbag lunge. Now when designing a standard training session, you're going to make sure that you hit on every single major movement pattern. That includes a upper push like a bench press, a upper pull like a pull-up, a lower push like a squat, and a lower pull like a deadlift. Now, if our goal is to get stronger, we want to make sure that we lift heavy, so all these exercises should just be primary exercises, right? Wrong. We need to first understand how fatigued you are and how the rest of your week looks with training, and then we can decide how many of these exercises should be primary, how many should be secondary, and tertiary. An example of this is, are you getting 90 minutes during your matches and training your ass off 5 times per week with the team? Then I would make 0 to 1 of these primary, I would make 1 to 2 of these secondary, and I would make 2 to 3 of these tertiary. There are many different options, but the 3 things that you need to make sure that you're considering when you are deciding this is make sure that you're checking on the movement pattern, make sure you're checking on your levels of fatigue, and then make sure that you are checking on which type of lift you're choosing between primary, secondary, and tertiary. Man City really used to be the team that would knock around the ball for 100 passes before absolutely finishing you off with a goal. Obviously he's tall, obviously he's really athletic and strong, but that's not the whole story. Because he is the perfect example as to why I tell footballers to jump and train out of all different types of weird positions. Because look at these positions that he finds himself in. Do you think a box jump is similar enough to this exercise to actually make you better at it? Because I sure don't. And no, that is not to say that using a box jump is useless. I've used them plenty in my programs, but that should not be the whole picture when you're training. So allow me to help teach you how to jump over even the tallest defenders and create goals out of absolutely nothing, just like Haaland. Now, there are many different positions that we need to be jumping out of when you are a footballer, but these 2 stick out as the most common. And these are things that I make sure that all of my footballers master, no matter what position you play. The first one is going to be redirecting horizontal force into vertical. You use this type of force redirection whenever you are traveling forwards and then have to jump straight up. So imagine that your team is on a counterattack or on a quick transition, and someone whips a ball into the box for you to finish off. To master this, one of the best things that you can do is training different types of approach box jumps. One of my favorite things to do with this is doing broad jumps into box jumps, because the broad jump and the box jump are the best exercises for just producing max raw power. So what you can do to start, if you've never done this exercise before, is start with a 50% max distance broad jump and then jump up onto a box that is relatively comfortable. Get this down and then start training your ability to go from 100% max effort broad jump into a higher box jump. Then you can go into repeat broad jumps. So you can do 2 broad jumps into a box jump, you can do 3 broad jumps into a box jump, so on and so on. By doing that, the more broad jumps that you do and the higher intensity that you are, the more momentum you're going to have to redirect up into the box. That will make it more difficult, and it will make it so it translates even better onto the pitch when you are finishing off your team's quick transitions. Now, what if you're not necessarily moving forward? Then what so often happens is there needs to be some element of rotation into it, and that brings us into number 2. These are going to be rotation jumps, but there's 2 very specific angles that we need to focus on here, because in football, it is not too terribly often that you're going to be rotating 180 degrees when you're jumping. That's not to say that 180-degree box jumps are not beneficial, but for this specific example and this specific training goal, we're going to be looking much more at 45 and 90-degree box jumps. Because if you are trying to finish off crosses in the box like Haaland, specifically maybe off of a corner where you're not necessarily running forward, and be able to produce both vertical and rotational force at the same time, you're going to want to use this progression. So it's really nice and simple. Week 1, what you are starting with is a 90-degree rotation box jump, and you're going to do it with a weight. For the next 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to lighten up the weight that you are holding onto as you do the jump, and you're going to increase the height of the box. Then the next 2 to 4 weeks, you'll do a 45-degree jump. Same thing, start with the heaviest weight, and then over the weeks, slowly lower it. Then finally, the last 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to do a regular box jump. The reason for that is because we want to overload your ability to jump high. So by decreasing the complexity, going from a 90-degree box jump to a more simple regular box jump, and a heavier box jump into a lighter box jump, so we're overloading the speed there. That and only that is going to be the way that you are going to be able to actually train your body to produce more force vertically on the pitch. And then, and only then, will you have the 3 pieces to start moving on a more elite level in terms of your fitness, just like Haaland. I really hope that this was helpful, guys. Again, make sure to comment below if you want me to do a different footballer in the next video. I'm going to try and make this a series so that we can keep these going for you guys. And I look forward to seeing you all next time.